Welcome to the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast from Never Too Late Cafe. I'm your host, Laura Womack. Each week, we sit down for a chat with someone just like you, someone who had an idea, a passion, a dream, or sometimes just a thought, and planted that seed, watched it grow into something they wanted to share with the world. If you have an idea for a topic or someone that would be a guest for the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, where you can join our Never Too Late Cafe Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you. So there was an award I saw, and it seems like it wasn't very long ago, the Hiawatha Homes. How did that come about?
Well, as I suggested, I cannot feed myself nor my wife solely on our artistic pursuits right now. So she and I both have day jobs. And I work for a nonprofit agency here in Rochester called Hiawatha Homes. And that agency provides a living environment with direct support care for adults living with disabilities. And so I joined this agency just over a year ago as their training coordinator, kind of drawing upon my education background and so on. And so my primary duty here is to see to it that new staff who are hired get through their appropriate training regimen so that when they get into the home to provide that direct care, they are as prepared and as can be. I picked up a side gig here at Hiawatha Homes, where I'm also the gadget guy. And what that means is
like IT?
Yeah, well, almost. We don't have an IT department, but they needed someone to kind of oversee and manage the cell phones that are issued to certain staff members in leadership roles here. And things had gotten a little bit out of hand. We had kind of lost track of all the phones we had, and we were still paying for plans on phones that weren't in use anymore, and that doesn't seem like a very good use of money. So in any case, my primary duty here is to be the training guy, but they were very nice to recognize kind of my willingness to step beyond the immediate job boundaries of my assigned role and take on other tasks like being the gadget guy. And so they very graciously gave me, it's like an employee of the month type award, but they called it a Hiawatha Heroes Award. But I accepted the award because I'm selfish that way, but I also wanted to make it very clear that I am not the hero here. The people who provide the direct care to those individuals with disabilities are the real heroes, and they are mostly whom we celebrate with that award. And so I felt a little sheepish taking one of the monthly awards away from someone who's doing that direct care. But the people I train to do the direct care work, those are the heroes at this agency, and I tip my hat to them for all the work they do on behalf of people with disabilities, and they do an amazing job.
So you talked about your training part. Have you done some consulting?
Yeah, my career path has a lot of hard left turns in it. I told you I started as a chemist, and then I went into science education. That was probably the longest stretch of my career path, almost 14 years in formal K-12 education. My job after I left high school teaching was to work at the local affiliate of PBS in St. Paul, the public television affiliate, and I was the science director for a children's science television series broadcast nationally on PBS, and that was a blast. And I had no
Wow.
business at all working in television. I have no background in that, but they didn't need me to be a television producer. They needed me to be the science advisor. So I got to work with all the television producers, and we had 6 years together producing episodes of a show called Dragonfly TV. And you can still find it in reruns in a few places. And so then after that, when 6 years in television is a long time. And so I was lucky to get that much time, working on a television series. And after it came to the end of its natural lifespan, there really wasn't anything else I could do at the television station. So I put another hard turn in my career path and entered corporate America as a training manager in health and safety topics for a national paint company, in fact, international paint company. And so I did that for a number of years. And then I wanted to strike out on my own. I got the entrepreneurial bug kind of late in life, and maybe it was part of my midlife crisis. I don't know. But I left the comfort of that corporate position to strike out on my own as a consultant, and I tried to bring together some of the process improvement techniques that I had put into practice in my corporate job, along with my education and training background, and offered consulting services to businesses who needed help with employee performance and productivity.
So the Business Network International, was that part of that during that time? It's an organization, it's probably networking.
Right, just as the name implies, BNI is how many folks know it just by its acronym, but Business Networking International is what those letters stand for. And that's an organization that a lot of small business owners, entrepreneurs, or solopreneurs, a new term I learned, solopreneurs join
I like that.
to network, and also to get the advantage of having a close cohort of fellow business owners from whom or with whom you build trust, and from whom you get referrals. And
Mm.
so I really didn't know anything about BNI until I struck out on my own to start this consulting business. So I found a chapter close to me, and I joined, and I attended the regular meetings. And I tell this story in one of my books. I have two self-published books, and in one of those books entitled "Success and Happiness from the Ashes," I tell the story of my time in my BNI chapter.
Mm.
And I spent a full year in the chapter and building those trust relationships with the men and women who were all like me, striking out on their own and starting their own businesses and whatnot. And I was able to refer a number of friends or other clients to them in their businesses. So much so that one month I got the chapter's monthly networking award for having
Mm.
made the most referrals that in that month. After my first year anniversary was up, though, I chose to leave the group because I, in turn, hadn't quite received enough referrals that led to paid business to even pay back my membership dues. And so I treated that as one of the story episodes in my book as a failure of sorts. But rather than just count it as a failure, I took as the success out of that story the friendships and the relationships I had built over that year,
Mhm.
and learned how to make some hard decisions as a business owner about which avenues to pursue and which ones not to pursue.
That's interesting. I do think I've heard of the group and maybe even attended a meeting many, many years ago when I lived in another state. But and then
Yeah,
there
there. I
was,
mean, you'll find them all over, and so like I say, even though I tell the tale of my time in my BNI chapter as a bit of a failure, um, it doesn't mean I dismiss BNI as a pursuit. I mean, I think it's a valuable organization, and they definitely do a lot of good for people starting out on their own in their business. It just turned out that my story after 1 year didn't have the same level of success as some of my colleagues.
sometimes we learn what we don't want to do.
Exactly.
So there's something that was mentioned in one of your ebooks, and we'll go into that a little bit more, but it was Six Sigma and it was in belt levels. Is this a training program?
So remember when I was coming to the end of my time at the television station, I had to figure out what I was going to do with myself. And I started looking at corporate training. And one of the terms, search terms that kept coming back whenever I would do that was Six Sigma. And it was often linked to training. And I had never heard of that phrase, Six Sigma, and I wasn't sure what it was all about. So I had to do some research on it. And I found that Six Sigma was a practice that many large corporations in particular would put into place as a process improvement strategy. If they identified elements of their business operation that they deemed inefficient or costing too much money or consuming too much time and resource, corporations say, well, what do we do with that? We either stop doing it or we just agree that it's going to be this money drain, right? Well, an alternative is to say, let's improve that process and either turn it around and make it a moneymaker, or turn it around and have it consume less money, or make the process more efficient so we can get things done more quickly and without such a demand on resources. So process improvement is what Six Sigma is about. Now, any company that embraces the Six Sigma philosophy is also embracing then training of its employees about what Six Sigma means and how to implement it within their operation. So it kind of comes inherently with training opportunities associated with it. And so once I started to understand that, then I went through some training of my own to become familiar with what Six Sigma was all about so that I would have that in my back pocket and try to give myself some advantage when seeking training positions in a corporate context. The belt levels that you read about, I don't know the history necessarily of why they picked up on kind of the martial arts theme of having different belt levels, but if you ever had a child go through a karate class, junior karate class or something, they advance through the various color belts, purple belt and yellow belt, and who knows what all the colors of belts
Right.
are in martial arts. But the Six Sigma um, process employed similar uh, designations called belts. And they had a yellow belt, which was kind of the lowest level of achievement in the process improvement realm. And then you could advance from yellow belt to green belt, where you're actually serving as a project manager on some sort of process improvement project. And upon completion of the project, you receive the designation of being a green belt. And then you can advance further to what they call the black belt, and that's doing more projects, but also projects of a bigger scope and impact within your company. And they have criteria for how you meet the green belt, how you meet
Right.
the black belt level, and so on. And then you could be a master black belt, in which you become a teacher and a coach and a mentor to other persons pursuing their green or black belt designation in that company. So that's how I approached the paint company in Minneapolis, where I got my job after the television gig, was to be a black belt designation in their company.
Oh,
And we interviewed a couple times, and they hemmed and hawed, and they didn't feel like I had the experience in that, and so they turned me down. And I kind of let that go and figured I wouldn't ever really be a candidate again. Well, a few weeks after they declined my application, I saw that they were posting a straight training position. It wasn't designated as a black belt position or anything like that. So I figured, there's no harm in applying again. And, I just relied on my years of experience by then in education and so on. So I reapplied to the same company, but for the training position. And it turns out what they had done, they didn't find any candidates they found suitable for that black belt position. So they pulled that position off the job postings and instead crafted a training position.
mm-hmm.
So I reapplied and thinking, they turned me down once. Why would they even look at me a second time? But they did, actually. They did look at me a second time. And it turns out I got hired in the same department where that black belt position would have been.
Just had
But
different
this
eyes.
isn't that funny? Just to close that loop, before long, I was doing black belt projects for them. And so I came in the side door through training, but eventually did start doing those process improvement projects and earned their black belt designation with that company.
Wow. Yeah, you say side door, but maybe they didn't know what they needed. So
No,
let's
and
talk.
I mean, it was a lucky circumstance for me. I learned a ton in that position. It brought back my chemistry background because they're a chemical manufacturer, so I had that to my advantage. They needed me to have training knowledge and experience, and I had years of that. And then I had gone through the schooling on the black belt process improvement work, so I just needed a home to apply those skills, and they provided it. And I was able to travel the world with them. I'd been to Singapore and China and Brazil, and so I mean, it turned out to be a very fortuitous circumstance to land in that role, and I'm grateful for my time there.
Wow, especially getting to travel. So let's talk about your ebooks. I know that you share some deeply personal information in it, and I like how um, you start with a quote and you end with a life lesson. So you put a lot of, in between those two, you put a lot of thought into your book. So do you want to talk about how you started writing?
Yeah, it came from kind of a dark place. So I've told you now all these left turns in my career path, from teaching to television to the corporate environment to starting my own business. And it was after 3 years of struggling mightily to get my consulting business going that I kind of came to the realization that I couldn't afford to drain my retirement savings to keep food on the table any longer, and the consulting business just wasn't going to happen. I knew I had to, try to give it at least 2 years and maybe three, having heard that 3 years is kind of the magical milestone in time for most startup businesses to kind of work through their growing pains and kind of get their footing. And so I held on as long as I could, but by the time that 3 year anniversary came up, I wasn't able to put it together. Now these are in the years 2012 to about 2014. So, we're just coming out of the 2009 recession, and things were tough then. It was tough for any startup business to get going in those years. And I thought maybe I could bust through if I just held on and stuck with it, but it didn't happen. So I was in this really dark place about having failed at this venture of trying to start my own business. And so I wasn't sure how to get myself out of this kind of emotional dark place I was in. And somehow I started recalling, I had a lot of negative thoughts rumbling through my head, and I was thinking about all the other things I hadn't succeeded at. At some point I was pursuing a doctoral degree in graduate school, and I got through my preliminary exams, and by the time I would have been working on my dissertation, I had other personal things going on in my family. My son was sick with brain cancer, and my marriage was struggling, and I did not have the time or energy to devote to graduate school while I was still teaching in those days. And so that was coming to mind. And in my attempt at pursuing a career in music came to mind, and that flopped, and that didn't get anywhere. And even some of those black belt projects that I was describing, one of those I got into some quicksand with, and I thought for sure I wouldn't ever earn my black belt because this project was kind of going nowhere, and I felt dejected about that. And so I was just had this heightened awareness of all these things over 30 some years of a career path, where it felt like just one failure after another, and I was just loaded down in my mind with all this negative self-talk. And at the same time, I was hearing all these messages from people that we generally deem to be highly successful. And one of the first things they always say when they're being interviewed or whatnot is, well, yeah, I look like a successful person, but let me promise you, I have failed more times than I've succeeded. And that becomes kind of a catchphrase, right? If you want to succeed, you have to learn how to fail. And so I took that to heart as best as I could, and I said, well, what's my story then? I've got all the failure parts of this story lined up in a row. What are my successes? So it taught me to look differently on all those episodes in my career path and think differently about them. And so I took time to reflect on what exactly could I say are the successes that came out of that. So that's how I crafted the book, Success and Happiness from the Ashes, as a series of professional and personal vignettes. And as you say, I open each vignette with the quote from somebody, and then I tell the story and describe what the failure was about, but also, what was the nugget of success that came out of that. And what's the life lesson there? Because certainly I am not the only person on the planet who has lived through a series of defeats and has had to bounce back and come back from that. So I managed to keep the book to only 9 such tales, but I'm sure I could have found more if I looked, and came up with the 9 life lessons there.
Well, I like the way that you described it. And then you have some, we'll put in our description about this podcast about your books, because you have also a couple of links to some methods of doing. There's a business management one and a story, framing your
Right.
story.
Yeah, when I'm not a natural born author, but I can string words together, and with some editing coaching from someone who's a better wordsmith than me, I got that first book out, and but I guess the teacher in me wanted people to know that anybody who has lived through some obstacle or overcome a failure has a story to tell, and telling that story doesn't have to be overly complicated. So the way I crafted the 9 vignettes in my book, I just turned into a little self-help story writing guide, and I make that available to people who visit my website. My website is pretty simple. It's rickswanson.com.
Mm.
And I have a place there, .com to myself, and I put that success story writing guide there. And then the other thing that I made available as a tool in that book is I have a Facebook group for people who also have a story to tell, and so they're welcome to join my Facebook group and tell of their victory that they salvaged out of defeat. And then there's a third tool that I provide when I finished with my consulting business. When I saw that that wasn't going to be able to continue, I'd actually used an exercise with some of my clients as far as looking for hidden business assets that they maybe didn't realize they had access to.
Mm.
Whether you run a small business or even a nonprofit agency, you're always feeling strapped for resources, and there's not enough this, that, and the other thing. Well, mostly that's money for people, and the tool does not help you necessarily find money directly, but it does help you identify what other assets you might have available that you could leverage into income streams. And so I ran a workshop for a community center in the town where I lived, and we did a 2-part workshop. One where we did the uh, identification exercise of finding these hidden assets, and then the part 2 was to do a workshop leveraging selected assets from those and turning them into an action plan that could lead to an additional source of income, in that case for the community center. And it was a very
Interesting.
satisfying exercise. And I ended up having to do that to myself after my consulting business was on its way out the door. Again, I'd worked hard for 3 years to try to get this business going, and I maybe didn't realize all that I had accomplished. So I put myself through my own workshop, basically, and made a inventory of assets I had accumulated or had access to, so that I could either leverage them in the future or possibly help others identify those assets in their own organization. So a link to that tool is also found in the back pages of that book.
So the Facebook group is titled.
I think I got to remind myself what I call it here.
well, when things come up automatically, it's sometimes like, oh,
I know when you're into it too close, because I'll give it a name that won't be the right group. But um, in the book, I spell out in my second book, Mission, Strength, and Potential. I spell out the letters of an acronym. The acronym is SPARC, spelled SPARC. And so I built a Facebook group around Spark,
okay,
where again,
interesting.
people can. So the link to that Facebook group is in the book, and then again, people can talk how they're using the assets they've identified in their own business or organization to build meaningful partnerships with other members of the community that benefits both partners. And that's the essence of what that Mission, Strength, and Potential book is all about.
That both of those concepts are very interesting. And you took it a step further by opening it up for Facebook. So using modern tools there. I have a question about music because I know that you studied that at one point and you're a lover of music. Is that how you became interested in wood songs? We had talked briefly before about your interest in wood songs was probably because of the television show or the radio show.
Yeah, probably about the time I first picked up that first 35 millimeter film camera. That must have been eighth grade or so. Was about the time I first picked up a guitar. And I didn't want to sing in the choir in junior high school, and I didn't play any other instrument. But they had a guitar class, and so I took a guitar class and started playing guitar, and and continued to play just on my own, through high school and into college and so on. And I thought, you might remember how I said I was struggling towards the end of my senior year of college, not sure if I was going to graduate at all with my chemistry degree. uh, but I was deeply interested in music by then. And after I finished my 4-year degree, I actually started a path towards earning a music certificate in liturgical music and doing music in the church.
Oh, okay.
Now, I've long since left the church and abandoned all interest in being that kind of musician, but the interest in playing guitar has not left me. So it's actually the first vignette in my Success and Happiness from the Ashes book is the realization that I was not going to have any realistic chance of being a working musician. I just didn't have the chops for that. But the life lesson coming out of that vignette was that that didn't mean I should abandon music as a pursuit. And
Mm.
so I've kept music in my life ever since, purely for fun and enjoyment. It's how I met my current wife,
Oh,
and I've played in a few different hobby bands with friends, and and so yes, I added banjo uh, to my repertoire of instruments that I play, and having then an interest in both folk music and bluegrass music. I first became aware of the Wood Songs Old Time Radio Hour, first on radio and then on TV, and ultimately made a personal connection with Michael Jonathan, the founder of Wood Songs, uh, which culminated in my wife and I traveling to Kentucky last year to participate in one of his Wood Song artist picnic events. And we might have been the farthest traveled, coming from
oh,
Minnesota to Kentucky for that particular
I
event. It was
would
kind of
bet
close
so.
call between kind of a close call between us and some folks from Detroit, but I think we were farther away.
Oh, I'd
But
say.
I met the most delightful group of artists and poets and musicians and authors, and we were so pleased to participate in that, and to the point where we think we're going to try holding a similar picnic of our own in the fall of 2023. So we'll see if we can pull that together. But yeah, music has, when I learned that I didn't have to make music my profession,
Mm.
I became much happier, and I found that I could definitely enjoy music as an avocation, and so it has been for me for 50 years now.
Wonderful. Well, Rick, it's been a delight chatting with you. And I have a feeling there's more to your life story. And hopefully, we'll be able to catch up again to see what you're up to. And I thank you for joining us today. And oh, I do want to ask about this podcast is called Bloom Where You're Planted. So, what does that quote mean to you?
I was giving some thought to that notion, and my short answer is I think of the Dolly Parton song that she wrote called Wildflowers. And in the lyrics of that song, she really describes herself autobiographically in that song as a wildflower, not content to stay in the confines of a manicured garden, but more wanting to explore the world and ride the wind and just see where I land and grow there. And there's a line in the chorus of that song that says, when a flower grows wild, it can always survive. Wildflowers don't care where they grow. And so I love that attitude. It's not so much, it's sort of a spin on Bloom Where You're Planted, because for me,
Mm.
Bloom Where You're Planted sounds like someone else made the decision for you, where you're going to be planted. I think Dolly's take in the lyrics of her song is, no, I'm going to choose where I want to go, and I'll thrive there.
Mm.
And I've been a little bit of a wildflower in that sense. All those left turns I described in my career path are a little bit of that, and
Mm.
so yeah, I think it's go ahead. What it means to me is go ahead and ride the wind, and make connections where you are, and then thrive and bloom there.
Mm. So, what sort of advice would you give to someone that wants to do either what you've done or what you're currently doing?
Well,
There's a lot
I
there.
there's a lot there, and certainly don't do some things I've done. But I think it's okay for your career path not to be a straight line.
Mm.
And so it takes some courage to take a sharp turn in your career path, but do that once in a while. A lot of people say, whatever you do, don't quit. Well, sometimes there's a right time to quit, and
Mm.
that's an element of wisdom that doesn't come easily to many of us. But quitting isn't always wrong. So I'd say give it time, right? Give things some time, and certainly invest yourself in the things that you do. But don't be afraid to quit. That's not the failure. That actually shows wisdom, I think. And so, but then get up and get ready to try the next thing.
So, what do you think Rick Swanson's next thing is?
Well, that I think I know.
Okay.
So, on the heels of self-publishing these two books, I'm embarking on a speaking career. So I want to move into the realm of public speaking now. Teaching was a lot like that. I just had a confined audience each day with my students. But yeah, the next thing I want to try my hand at is public speaking, and I've got the platform of my two books to speak from, and now it's just a matter of learning to sell myself a little bit and get out there in the world and find some audiences that want to hear what I have to say. So, next time we meet, Laura, if I can get a few more hard left turns in my in my crooked career path, and we'll see right where I end up then.
Well, it's really been a pleasure having you here today. And I thank you again for joining us on the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast. And again, it's sponsored by Never Too Late Cafe. And this is Laura Womack, and saying bye for now. And I thank you again, Rick, for being with us today.
Thank you.